fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery.
Well, welcome back into the House of Mystery. I'm Al Warren. Got Mr. John Copenhaver here. How you doing, John?
I am, doing as well as can be expected. How's that? How's that for an answer?
That was a good answer because it says a lot, but it says nothing.
Right. Exactly.
Which is perfect. That's the way we got to keep it. We're just here. We're
here. We're existing. We're moving forward in the world, and
Yeah.
Talking about writing, which makes
and we're here about writing. We're here about the good stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
So now joining us, we've got an author, and she's got a new book called The Butterfly Trap. It's Clea Simon. So thank you for being here, Clea.
Thanks for having me.
Well, you're welcome. It's a pleasure. So the Butterfly Trap. Let's just kind of go over what's the basic premise of the book for listeners that don't know.
Sure, and thanks again for having me. The Butterfly Trap is a psychological suspense, but it's not your traditional mystery. It's a he said, she said, sort of a slow burn. It's sort of looking at a relationship and how, we never really know what our partner is thinking. So the first half is from Greg's side, when he sees this beautiful woman, and he always sort of fantasized that he would fall for an artist. And he does. And Anya is this beautiful, to his mind, ethereal creature. And he goes out of his way. He's a medical researcher. He changes his profession because he wants to support her. He becomes a practicing surgeon to support her in her art. But then halfway through, it flips, and we see that things aren't quite as Greg thought they were, and that Anya, with all the best intentions, let's just say things go awry.
Good.
That's what we wanted to happen at all.
We want that.
I should say things are going awry even in the Greg part of the book, but let's say we learn a little bit more once we flip over to the other side.
Gotcha, yeah.
So when you flip to the other side, are you writing from Anya's side then?
Yes.
Her point of view?
Yes, the first half is Greg's point of view, and it was really fun to write from a male point of view, and then the second half is Anya's point of view.
Wow. What do you do to prep yourself to get into the mindset, let's say, of Greg? So you're sitting here, Greg, and you know the story, or you've written the story, so you kind of know what's going to happen. So how do you put yourself into that frame of mind?
I'll admit to a cheat. Many years ago when I was in college, I had a serious boyfriend, and we had broken up for a while, and then we got back together. And I read his diary. He kept a journal. And I found it very enlightening to discover how he talked about women and how he talked about sex, because, of course, when we were apart, he was seeing other women. And actually, some of that came up in the Butterfly Trap. I was like, oh, yeah, I know what Greg thinks like. I don't know. I just sort of embodied him. I'm a heterosexual woman, so you could say it was a leap, but my male readers think that I pretty much got him right.
Oh, good. And so her point of view, are you making one person good, one person bad? Is there sort of...
Oh, that would be too simplistic, Al. Come on.
That's too simplistic. So you because that's really the truth. I mean, most people have a complex situation, right? There's good and bad to everyone, as they say,
And everybody misinterprets. Everybody sees what they want to see. It's just, the truth is elusive, shall we say.
Oh yeah. We're seeing that today nowadays.
Oh God, yes. But yeah, there is no good guy or bad guy on the Butterfly Trap. But both Greg and Anya see themselves as the heroes and heroines of their own stories. Are they? Are they doing what they have to do? Are they doing what they want to do? Are they being kind to each other? Are they being loving? Well, that's for the reader to decide.
It's so interesting. Like, I am pretty fascinated with perspective, and I guess, and it sounds like you're very interested in this too, the limitation of perspective. And as you're writing, there must be chances for the reader to kind of, I guess, peek around the shoulder, or, a little sort of And maybe this happens, I'm guessing maybe this sort of happens once you get into Anya's point of view. You're kind of understanding some of the things that Greg, was seeing. You're seeing another, that must have been fun to write, I'm kind of placing I think it's fun to write, but did you find it fun to write? Maybe you did.
It was fantastic. I loved it. And yes, exactly. Putting the hints. Because, say when we start with Greg, he sees himself as this good guy, but there are hints, even like comments he'll make or things he'll reflect on. It's like, ideally the astute reader will start to see that perhaps things aren't exactly as he pretends to think they are. Because, we also fool ourselves, of course. But yes, I love that. I had so much fun with this book. This is sort of, the book of my heart in some ways. It just, it was a blast exploring this relationship. But, of course, because I'm a crime writer, there has to be some blood in there as well.
Yeah, of course. Talk a little bit about sort of where what was the sort of spark for this idea? Like what, sort of led you to the point of saying, I really want to tell a kind of, I guess, a sort of dark love story from two different perspectives.
A dark love story.
Love story.
That ends tragically. Let me throw in there.
Okay.
Thank you for asking that, because this is probably a longer answer than you want. But a friend of mine was widowed, and the relationship was difficult. But after his wife died, he wrote what he called the thank you F you letter, where he's like, thank you, I'll call her Jane. Thank you, Jane, for this. F you, Jane, for that. And he and I were talking about that, and he'd started dating somebody else, and that relationship was falling apart. And at one point, he was visiting, and we just both ended up sort of, burying ourselves and having a good cry at the kitchen table. And after he left, I realized that in some ways, his relationship echoed my own parents' relationships. And my father was a doctor, was a physician. And my mother was an artist, but of course, considering the time, she was perhaps more important a doctor's wife. And I remembered these fights they used to have when I was a kid, where my mom would just needle my dad, just needle and needle and needle, and he'd blow up at the dining room table, and he had big voice, big man, he'd roar. And she'd, run off to the kitchen and cry, and me being the youngest and a girl, I'd go into the kitchen to comfort her. And all the time I was comforting her because she was crying because he'd yelled. I think, well, I kind of feel bad for him too. She sort of pushed him. And that's when I realized there's this dynamic there that, it's both sides. I'm not casting aspersions on either gender, or any gender, shall I say, to be specific. Men, I think, hetero men tend to, let's say they fetishized female artists. A woman, a lot of men, if they meet a woman and she's an accountant, they just sort of consider her a person. But if she's an artist, it's like, ooh, she's, magical. And on the flip side, a lot of straight women still, I think, look to men to be, to some extent, if not protectors, then providers. There's a certain stability there. And I think especially with the medical professions, women will say, oh, that's something stable. That's something to link onto. I try not to be judgmental. This is stuff we pick up from our parents. Obviously, I am drawing on my parents' experience. But I think that's still there. And that's, that all came into play. And I wanted to explore that and also explore how that would play out in this generation with younger people, with the people who are, much more self-actualized and independent. Do those roles still play a part, and do those biases still play a part? And if so, how? And me being me and me being kind of twisted, that ended up leading to a horrible, horrible ending.
Did you set out with a meaning or a purpose for this story? It sounds like you had something else that you wanted to get across to the reader, or is that just me thinking that?
No, that's a very astute question. Thank you for that. I actually didn't set out with a meaning, and I wasn't sure when I first started writing this what kind of book it would be. I really just wanted to explore these dynamics because in my friend I saw them playing out again as they had played out differently with my parents, and I was just like, this is interesting to me. And you're both writers, so the way we figure out what we think is we write it. It's when you start writing it, you realize how your characters want to act, and you start realizing what you believe and what you think will happen. And so this was a way to explore it. But then it came together as a story, and then, of course, much revision later, I hope it's a compelling plot.
Do you think relationships are changing then? Do you think that, because you say that that's still, looking toward the man as a provider or protector, and that, do you think that's different in the younger generations now?
Oh, I think so. Yeah. I mean, I think that a lot of the underlying assumptions of gender roles have changed. Thank God for that. And I say that as someone who's been married now for more than 2 decades, and happily. But I think that we all carry with us prejudices and assumptions. And I think that those assumptions for what our lover or partner will be are some of the most deeply held, and sometimes we don't even realize what they are. And we do inherit things from our parents or from our families of origin. So I do think they're changing. Those blind spots are still there, and it's in the blind spots that you find the mystery, or in my case, the suspense.
And so when you say really, I don't know, violent, gruesome ending, is it? Are you really in? Is it really kind of violent? Lots of blood and sex and all that.
Well, there's lots of sex, which is great fun to write. And I often write cozy, so I don't get to write that. So that was fun to write. There's blood. I don't want to give anything away. It's not gruesome, but it is a suspense story. There's going to be trauma. Put it that way.
Good. We like trauma, don't we, John?
I like to read about it.
Yeah. Really.
I would prefer not to have it in my life, although I think it.
There's trauma, and I think what's more important to me, the trauma, the blood is fun, is that I think by the end, the reader will have a sense of everybody's flaws and what was really going on all along. That to me, that's what I really wanted to get at.
Yeah, because as a reader, we have the privilege of seeing both points of view, right?
Yeah.
And how wonderful is that? It's the magic of reading.
Yeah.
I have a question. I was curious just about, you said that you're dealing with younger gender roles and things have shifted. Did you find sort of in creating these characters that some things hadn't shifted? And I mean, was that a surprise, or was that something you uncovered while you were writing it?
Well, I think that the fetishization of artists still continues. One thing that was fun to deal with is because a lot of the Butterfly Trap takes place in the artist community, specifically in an artist co-op. There's obviously much more acceptance of gender fluidity and same-sex couples and, the LGBTQ community. That's just much more normalized than it was. So one of the stable couples we meet are a lesbian couple who live next door to Anya and who, to some extent, take care of her. But then, they've got to get on with their lives. One of them gets a fellowship, and they want to have kids, so they move away, and Anya's on her own. So that has changed. Other than that, I think the overt gender roles have become more subtle, but to some extent they're still there. And, one of Anya's main relationships is with her mother, and her mother is worried about her and wants to see her, quote unquote, taken care of. So that comes into play as well, and there's pressure from her mother.
Yeah, it seems like as I've had conversations with younger, millennial friends, it's interesting how much I've, in those conversations, uncovered that a lot of these sort of what we think of as things that affected my mother, who was 93, and it was certainly part of the you stay at home and raise the children, generation, how some of those things are still kind of, even though they're both working, but some of those ideas are still there.
Yeah.
Even though they're like trying to push away from them and know they're there, there's this kind of like weight that's still on them. I think that's fascinating.
Exactly. It's a valuation in a way. It's like it's not that anyone expects Anya to stay home and raise the kids, but her work as a painter is not quite as valued as Greg's work as a surgeon. And some of that is monetary because she's not earning what he's earning. But there's a little prejudice in there. It's like, well, art is a frippery. It's not essential to the human condition. And is that because it's art and not science, or art and not medicine, or is it because she's female?
Yeah, that's a great question. Or maybe both.
Maybe both, yes, really.
It's probably a combination of both. There's probably a point system. Oh, I'm terrible. Listen, so where did all the writing start for you? How did you become a writer?
Wow. I think I'm going to probably give you the answer that a lot of your guests give you, in which that I've always been a writer. I mean, from elementary school, when I first learned how to read, I was making up stories. I never colored in between the lines. I always wanted to make up my own endings for stories and stuff. But the bigger picture of when I started writing novels is that there used to be this fantastic mystery specialist bookstore in town. I live in Massachusetts, in Cambridge, Massachusetts, called Kate's Mystery Books. And I read a ton of mysteries, so I was always there. I was friends with Kate. And I was a journalist, and I wrote several nonfiction books. And my last nonfiction book had to deal with women and cats. It was The Feline Mystique. And, I just explored the lore and the mythology of women and cats. And Kate every year had a holiday party, which was fantastic. She'd have local authors sign books, and people would be spilling out onto the street. It was this little house. It was just fantastic. And she'd have Robert Parker and Linda Barnes, just everybody. And after The Feline Mystique came out, she said, Clea, you should come sign your book. And I said, well, Kate, Feline Mystique's not a mystery. And she said, Clea, believe it or not, there's a big overlap between women who love cats and mystery readers. So she had me at the party, and I recall it was so crowded and, packed, and everyone was drinking and talking. I don't think I even got to stand next to my pile of books. It was like that much of a madhouse. But at the end of the night, we were cleaning up and, finding half-filled glasses of wine tucked into the bookshelves and everything. Kate said to me, Clea, you should write a novel. And it was like I was given permission. And suddenly I went back to that, third grade self where it's like, wow, I could make up stories. And I swear I started my first mystery the very next day. I haven't stopped since.
Oh, there you go. You got an obsession with cats, eh?
Well, I do love cats, and that's the flip side. It's like I have the harder books, which can get quite. I'm not big on violence, but I am big on difficult truths and complicated characters, shall we say? With books like The Butterfly Trap or Hold Me Down. But then the flip side, when I need a break, I do my cat cozies, and they're just great fun.
Right. And Prue Marlowe, eh?
Yes. Yeah, she was one of my amateur sleuth heroines. She's I call those my pet noir. She can understand what animals think, but it's not that they tell her things. It's that she sees what they're seeing and gets the gist of how they're reacting to the world. And of course, everyone thinks she's crazy.
And the voice of an animal, how do you get into that? How do you do a voice of an animal? Just as a human?
Well, do you have a pet?
Oh, yeah.
Well, there you go. Don't you have conversations with your pet? Be honest now. Be honest. Don't you say?
Oh, all the time.
There you
go. I talk to myself too. I do. But yeah, I always talk to my pets. I have dogs. I always get dogs, rescue dogs.
Same thing. It's like, I'm sure you see your dog looking at you and thinking, Alan, really, enough already. It's time to eat. Or, quit the foolishness. I'm going to get on the sofa.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's it. Yeah. So, I like to say I don't make up the cat dialogue. They tell it to me.
No, I'm always like, I'm convinced my dog is rolling his eyes at us. So
Exactly. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. They're always wondering, what are these people doing?
Oh, goodness. Yeah. Humans, eye roll.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These stupid people, they can't even keep themselves clean.
Yeah.
I will say, in both The Butterfly Trap and Bad Boy Beat, which was my last not cozy, that was just me writing for fun. Murder on the first page, zip, zip, zip. I doff my cap to the cat cozies. There's always a cat mentioned. Mm-hmm. Somebody used to have a cat, or a pet she used to have, or that cat that came with the apartments. In the Butterfly Trap, it's the pet she used to have. She remembers at one point.
Do you ever have trouble, because you do write into very different sort of subgenres, with readers like accidentally hopping into the other?
Oh yes, I do have to warn. I have to warn my cozy readers that The Witch Cats of Cambridge, which is my current cozy series, is very gentle and sweet, and it is a balm for my soul in troubled times. But that they should stay away from books like The Butterfly Trap or Hold Me Down or Bad Boy Beat, because those books are a lot tougher, and they're not going to enjoy them as much. But for me, They're the flip sides of the same coin. They're who I am as a writer.
Oh, yeah.
What does it do for you when you're writing that? Like a hard scene like that, like the butterfly trap when you're doing that. How do you come out of it at the end of the book? How does it affect you?
Oh, that's a great question. How do I come out of it? I don't know if I do. I sort of stay in it for a while. But sometimes, it can be as simple as doing a workout, But I'm definitely in that voice for a while. It's in my head. I write these different kinds of books, but I can't write two at the same time. I mean, I'm very much in the world of, when I was in the butterfly trap, I was very much in the world. And, and you asked about sympathy. When I was writing Greg, I felt him. I mean, he has his blind spots, but he is who he is, and he tries very hard to do the right thing. But then the same is true for Anya. She just, she's stuck in an untenable situation. She's doing what she has to survive, or what she can do to survive. And I don't know how I come out of that. I think I probably stayed in that for a year and a half.
Oh, is your husband tied up in the basement?
Really? He's extremely tolerant. Let me put it that way. He's used to me after all these years.
Yeah. I think sometimes I'm the one that probably should be tied up. Yeah.
That's a different story.
Oh, yeah. I'm interested if, I teach at Nebraska and at VCU here in Virginia, which is where I live. And whenever I'm sort of talking to students, I sort of say, I think writers have, most writers have certain things that come naturally, kind of gifts that they're given. And then almost all writers have things that they struggle with or are difficult. What would you say is something that came to you sort of as a gift, and what would you say if, something that you feel is more difficult for you, and how have you addressed it over the years?
Wow, that's a fantastic question. I think that dialogue comes to me because I hear my characters, and so that's perhaps the easiest. And with dialogue comes world building, because your characters, I want to say especially in mysteries, but maybe that's true in all fiction, your characters create the world around them. So that's what I'm lucky to have. That comes naturally. Plotting is always difficult because you get yourself into a mess and you have to figure out not only how to get yourself out of it, but how to get yourself out of it by steps. It can't just be, boom, one reveal, because what fun is that? It has to be, you have to embed clues along the way. So plotting is always difficult. And other than that, sometimes fleshing out, the world is there and it's complete, but sometimes I started to say fleshing out, but what I really mean is often when I read my first drafts, I realize that a lot of what I meant is still in my head and it is not yet on the page. Does that make sense?
Oh, yes.
So, I find that I underwrite a lot. And to me, the scene is complete in my head. But then, this is one of the reasons, and I'm sure you tell your students this, that it's good sometimes to put a manuscript away and then give it a little time and then revisit it. I read it, and all the stuff that I thought was there isn't. It's like, oh, it's still in my head. I have to actually go and write those words to explain that. So that's the stuff that is, more learned skill and less, welcomed gift, if that helps.
Oh, yeah, totally. Because don't you get scared that you're going to lose some of it?
Oh, every time. Every time you start a new book, it's like, I don't know how to do this. But this is when it's good to have, a supportive partner and good friends, because my husband and all my friends will say to me, you always feel like this, just keep writing. I'm a firm believer in the write, every day, and that eventually it's like turning on a rusty tap, and eventually the water will run clear. Giving myself permission to write, awful crap in the first draft and knowing that I'll fix it later.
Yeah, kind of just a spew draft.
Yeah.
Just throw it out there and kind of
exactly
go back to it and stuff like that. Is there a certain limit to what you can write, as in when you're doing the dialogue? How do you draw the line of what's good and what isn't, or what you're comfortable with? What's realistic? Do you know what I mean? Like when you go back to your manuscript and you're reading it, is there times you kind of go, ooh, I don't like that they said this, or I don't like that.
Oh, of course, yes. And that's, revision. Oh, I think you have to trust your ear. And I often do try to read things aloud. I think that sometimes the shortcut to be avoided is that people will put things in dialogue simply for plotting purposes. And you need to know what you want to achieve, but you can't have people say things that are not natural to, people. You can't have characters say things that aren't natural to them simply to advance the plot. People have to say things that make sense for that character to say. People, I keep going, they're real to me. And so that's sort of the danger, if that helps at all. I'm not sure that answers your question, but
yeah, it's kind of there. I see that. I can see you. So do these characters talk to you while you're driving?
Yes.
And they still let you have a license?
Well, I've learned, I always have my button on the phone to record bits of dialogue. So yes, it's the classic thing. I've walked into the local grocery store and said things like, what are the signs that a body has been poisoned? Or, walk into the wine and cheese cask around the corner and you're talking to myself about, after 3 days, the body would look like that. And people are, to some extent, they're tolerant and they're used to me.
Yeah. Well, it becomes more normal nowadays. I see someone in the store walking down the road talking to themselves really loud and being very graphic. 10 years ago, I would have thought, no, there's a nut case here. But
exactly.
Now it's just, all these wireless devices, they're talking to someone or something. That's funny. Well, that's fantastic. So listen, let's talk about how people find you. Do you like to interact with readers and stuff like that? And if you do, what's your website, social media? Where do you have a lemonade stand?
I do not have a lemonade. Right now, I'm in Massachusetts and it's February, so no one's wanting lemonade.
Ice
cocoa stand.
Really, that wouldn't be a bad idea. But yes, I have a website and it's www.cleasimon.com. You can find me on, I think, all the social media platforms. I'm old enough that I'm still on Facebook and Instagram, of course, and I'm even on LinkedIn. I actually just posted something there, and Blue Sky, and for now at least I'm on X. But probably the best way to reach me is at cleasimon.com, and there is a link you can click on that just says email me, and of course I love it. I love hearing from readers. They have the best questions. Sometimes people want to know about upcoming books, but sometimes, they'll argue with me about something in a book. And that's the best, because that means my book has come alive for them.
Right. Yeah. The reaction's better. So are you really into following, the reviews and stuff, or do you kind of look at every one and analyze it and see what people are saying, or do you kind of ignore that route?
I should lie and say I don't, but of course I do. Oh. I try not to. I mean, the problem, of course, is that by the time the reviews have come out, the book is out of your control.
Right.
Yeah.
So you just hope that people get it.
Yeah.
I mean, I had one review with The Butterfly Trap that referred to Henry James's The Golden Bowl.
Oh.
And I was like, oh my God, I haven't read that since I was in college. But yes, that's, it's a late Henry James. There's no reason any mystery reader should read it. It was something I read when I was, 22 or whatever. But the first half of it, it's a menage. It's a romantic triangle, and the first half is from one side, and you get their side, and you just feel so sorry for the poor girl on the other side. But then halfway through, it flips over, and you see these two lovers, and you see this quote unquote poor girl is totally got the upper hand all along. And I was like, yes, so how many years ago that probably embedded itself in my consciousness. And, I might have forgotten about that if a review hadn't referred to it. It's like, wow, that was really fun for me.
You could always use like the reviewer and put them in your next book and have them have a terrible life.
Yes, but this one I love. This one was great. I mean, he or she really got the butterfly trap. I felt heard.
Oh, good. And that's all that matters, right? Yeah.
Yes. or feeling read, I should say, Al.
Yeah. That's important, Well, listen, we appreciate you being here. Now, the book, The Butterfly Trap, it's from our guest, the author Clea Simon. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a blast.
Thanks, Clea.
This has been a production of the House of Mystery Radio Show. To find out more about our show, guests, or hosts, go to our website at houseofmysteryradio.com.